Meghan, thank you for joining me today. For those of our viewers who haven't met you before, I should just give a disclaimer. You're my sister-in-law, so you're married to my brother Joseph. You are mother of Evelyn and author of now, am I right in thinking 3 books?
3 books.
Three
yes.
books. One of which we're actually going to be discussing today, and it's Desired Child. We're going to be looking at this as we introduce our first topic today, which is abortion, and looking through some of the stuff that surrounds that. And so for our viewers who have been following us along, we have been doing throughout this year a month-by-month walkthrough of issues that relate to kingdom justice. And so what we've been looking at is topics that maybe the world would call, say, our social justice issues, but we know that are on the heart of our Father, and that as Christians we should care about. And so in March we're looking at abortion. And what I wanted to do is, because previously, so in January we did climate change, February we did modern day slavery, I'm aware that those subjects, they're really, really super crucial and important, but it's very rare that any of our viewers would have any personal connection to it.
Sure.
And also it's probably not going to be quite as controversial, because we could all agree that those subjects we want to discuss them.
Yeah.
Abortion is a real challenging issue to discuss. One, because it's so important, so crucial for Christians, but also because it's intensely personal and actually can be quite a painful topic to discuss. So I invited you on, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to hear a bit about your story, because I mentioned earlier you have a little girl, you and Joseph, who is 1 year old.
Yeah, she's 1.
And she's awesome. I'm one of her biggest fans. But the pregnancy that led to her being born was not an easy one. And at various different points, I'll kind of let you expand on that shortly. There were, I suppose, options that were given to you.
Sure.
That were really kind of tough decisions, and you chose one route, which was to continue with the pregnancy.
Sure.
And so I wanted to start with looking at that. So, and then we've got her here actually.
She's
now.
here with us.
We'll bring her in, I think, probably later on in the conversation. So I just wonder, could you give us a quick rundown, a bit about this book? Tell us a bit about your story, who you are as the author, and what led to you writing this book.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to tell you about this book. So Desired Child is our story. It's pretty short. You can read it in a few hours. And so the story talks about our pregnancy. At 12 weeks, we were diagnosed with, Evelyn was diagnosed with spina bifida, which is a neural defect in the spine. So it means that her spine didn't form properly in the first 4 weeks of pregnancy. That's as early as it needs to form properly. So right then, 12-week scan, we were told there might be a problem. We can terminate the pregnancy at that point. And then as the situation got more advanced and we started to have it confirmed, this is spina bifida, it's definitely what it is. This is what's going to happen to your baby. She has quite a severe defect on the spine. It's from L3 to L6, which means it will affect everything from the hips down. She might not be able to walk. It might twist her spine so that she can't breathe properly. It might cause significant brain damage and underdevelopment of the brain, so she might be in a state where she isn't aware of herself, and she might have to live in a facility. So they're giving us all of these facts and figures throughout the first appointments. This is all before 20 weeks. And then at every single appointment they say, would you like to terminate the pregnancy? And you can change your mind until birth. So that happened again and again. But there were 3 options to us, and they were made available to us every time. So there is surgery during pregnancy, and there's surgery when the child is born, which will correct this spinal defect. Now that doesn't cure the problem. The spinal damage has been done, so they still will have some mobility problems. It's impossible to tell what that level will be. And then, so we decided to go with the route of surgery on the spine while she was in the womb. So we went to London. It's the only place where that could be done in the UK. It was a good thing we weren't shipped to Belgium, because that would have been the second option for us if things had been slightly different. So we went to London, had the surgery at 25 weeks. They do that because there's a high risk of preterm labour following the surgery. So they want to do it while the fetus is viable so that the child can survive if they're born. So we had that surgery, of course, at 25 weeks, and Evelyn was born at 26 weeks. So usually babies make it to about 30 weeks and then they're born. The best case scenario is they make it to 37 and they're born by cesarean in a planned way. But I went into labour the day we got home from Lincoln and she arrived.
I remember.
Yes.
It was a kind of felt sick in my stomach at that point. It was a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
So walk us through what happened following that.
So went into hospital in the middle of the night, and I'm 26 weeks pregnant at that point, and the doctor comes up to my bedside and says, "Meghan, what do you want to do? This baby's just had surgery. She's not going to do well." And I'm given the choice at that moment when she's about to be born. And I say, "Do whatever you can." She's just talking in the background. "Do whatever you can to make her be okay." Yeah. So she was born. I had to be put under general anesthetic. There wasn't time for an epidural, so I was just put under. They got her out of my body, and then it took them 5 minutes to resuscitate her. So she was born in very poor condition, couldn't breathe, and they had to ventilate her. The first time they ventilated her, it failed, so they had to re-intubate her while she was just born. So it took them a few hours to stabilise her, and praise God they did. Yeah. And then she was taken to Nottingham at the earliest opportunity because she was born in Lincoln Hospital, but they're not high enough level facility to take care of babies that young. So they had to take her in an ambulance to Nottingham. So then there was a period of time when I was in Lincoln Hospital recovering and she was in Nottingham, and she had just departed from my body. And any woman who's been pregnant knows like that bond is strong. Yeah. So it was really hard to be apart from her. And then while she was in Nottingham, she was there for 3 months. She was in NICU for 3 months between Nottingham and Lincoln. Yeah. So she needed a lot of help in that time. She needed 3 further surgeries. So she had surgery on her bowel, on her heart, and on her eyes. And she was on and off the ventilator. And we just had a very adventurous time there. But God was there the whole time, and He provided for us financially. Yeah. He brought every surgery through with the best case scenario. Our church family and our biological families rallied around us like crazy. And this book just talks about the miracles that happened during that time and just this God's hand on our lives. And I really felt like God wanted me to tell this story in a vulnerable way so that people would see what it's like to go through something that traumatic with Him. And also it was a healing process for me to be able to kind of have like a sozo. People listening might be familiar with sozo or might not be, but it's like whole healing. When you look at what's happened in your life with a God lens and you find healing through that. So I've included journal entries and poetry. I'm a bit of a poet.
Yes. In fact, one of your other books is a book of poetry. Yeah,
I've got a book of poetry published this year. But I included all of that because I wanted to really bring people into what was going on in my heart and my soul during this time.
And that's so valuable. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of explore with you and sort of see how you kind of approach it is that because our topic is looking at abortion, the reason why that's relevant is because you mentioned that various different appointments throughout the stages. So like as early as 4 weeks to right up to when she was born at, is it 26 weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At 26 weeks, at which point a fetus is viable. Termination was given as an option. And I know just from research and from other people who I've also spoken to who've been in similar situations, that's often it's kind of given as an option, but also as like the preferred option, as if like, you're not going to want to go through with this. This is going to be really, really difficult. Life is going to be tough for you and the baby. And like, but before we go into sort of like the ethics of abortion and looking at what that actually that means and whether it's right or wrong, actually, there is another picture here, which is of someone who, no doubt in your situation, I can imagine that's also like when you're carrying a pregnancy. I've got 2 children, and you want everything to be perfect. You want everything to be okay, and it's one of like the most like it can be one of the most scary things when you have like news when anything could be wrong because you just want your child to be safe, and for everything to be okay. I just think that there's got to be a kind of a point in your mental process when you're presented with those options? Because you mentioned before as well, they were really like worst case scenario. This is what it could be. You know, there may be limited brain development. She may have to have like constant care. So they didn't sort of give a best option or like a best case scenario. They were sort of emphasizing on the negative. What is the process like in walking through with God when you're faced with that decision? And how would you sort of say, is there any way that society kind of like can view it differently? Does that question make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. So the first time we were offered the abortion was at 12 weeks when they first saw the defect. And yeah, I grew up, so my mum has MS, so she's been disabled throughout my childhood and my adulthood. So when they first told me, the first time I kind of heard of spina bifida before, but it had never been a part of my life. So in that first appointment, when they said, this might be spina bifida, do you know anything about it? I'm really grateful because the first thing that they actually mentioned was a charity called Shine, which really supports families with spina bifida. So that was mentioned before terminating the pregnancy.
That's really
so
good.
Already I was like, there's a way forward. There's like a community of people there who have this condition and have like enjoyable life. But also just with a like understanding of who a person is, like for me that really starts at the very beginning of our creation. And even like we have a plan and a destiny before we're on this planet in the first place. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was imagining having a child with my husband Joseph, and we were a family already, and she was just really small, and I had this feeling that she was a girl, and I already knew her name from the very beginning. And I'm so grateful for God giving me that wisdom to know who she was. And when they said she might have spina bifida, my feeling in that moment was, I know more of her now. I know that she has this. And I know like this extra part of all of the dimensions that she is, that we're going to work through as a family. We're going to pray for healing in this pregnancy. We're going to pray for healing when she's born. At no point in my mind did it cross my mind to want to deny her that possibility of existence and life. It says in our own human rights, Article 2 says that every human has a right to life, and the government has to protect that right to life. And for some reason in our culture and in our society, that starts at birth. Like with spina bifida, you can terminate up to birth. The fetus has been viable for a very long time by then. And as you can see with Evelyn, you know Evelyn, a lot of people watching will know Evelyn. Like, she's just like you and me. She just has slightly limited ability in her legs. And she would have been denied that life because of a worst case scenario.
Yeah. She's so clever and like so feisty, and her character is amazing. And yeah, it's odd to think that, like, to be honest, you wouldn't really, especially like she's one, there's no difference. She's such a precious person. So it's kind of odd to me that would like be something that, you know, why they would see her as being some like less value, even whilst in the womb.
Exactly.
It's really bizarre.
And 81% of babies diagnosed with spina bifida in the womb are aborted. They are terminated. So in 2019, in Evelyn's own birth year, 3,183 babies were aborted because of this one condition. Because of fetal anomaly. Yeah. And she could have been 3,184. Like, just to put that into a context, that she is a living person. And I don't want to bring like condemnation on anybody, but I do want to offer a path of hope, because they do give you the worst case scenario, and there is no way of predicting what's going to happen with that baby, what is going to happen even just from a medical perspective, what is going to happen with that fetus in the womb and what the outcome is going to be. But with God, like, complete healing is possible. Yeah. So it didn't make sense for us to end that life.
Well, I'm really glad, and I think anyone who knows Evelyn is going to be so glad that wasn't a choice that was made. And yeah, she's such a valuable little girl, and so clever and wonderful. So I think the next point that I really want to kind of look at together is it's really sort of just my thoughts on the matter. So at the moment, am I right in thinking, I suppose you probably know more about this than I do, sort of up until, is it 22 weeks is currently the legal age for termination?
24.
Is it 24? Okay, so it's actually even later than I realised. So 24 weeks you can, under the law, a woman can abort a child. I have, I've seen fetuses of that age, and they very much are human. I mean, I personally believe that from the day of conception, it's a life, and that it's precious and it's human.
Yeah.
But this is something that I wanted to pick up on, because you've been talking about how Evelyn is like she's fantastic, and she's just like anyone else, and her life is so valuable and precious. And there's this weird thing that happens in our law where when a child is born, and when we encounter someone with disabilities, rightly we say we want to make sure that they have equal access to everything that the rest of us have in society, that they're treated as equals, that no one looks down on them, and that they're valued in the same way that anyone else is. That's like a basic human right, and it's human dignity, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet, you mentioned in this story that legally, because someone has something like spina bifida or another defect. So I know that a lot of people with cleft palate, or I think is it club feet as well. If they catch these things in sort of the womb, abortion is actually allowed right the way up until birth.
Yeah.
And that's a really discomforting thing. I imagine for a lot of people it's really uncomfortable, but the reality is that's currently law in the UK.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think as Christians, I think we should be, even aside from looking at abortion as a wider issue, just on that issue alone, the fact that actually there's a thing of how we value people. On the one hand, we're saying, we value people and we want to treat them equally and with equal value. And on the other hand, we're saying your life is not worth the same.
Yeah.
All because of that. And like you said, even at 26 weeks, when you were on the operating table awaiting the C-section, they still offered that to you. And I find that really upsetting. Do you have any, because you've obviously been part of this, I don't want to say debate, but you've kind of been part of this conversation for a while now.
Yeah.
And looking at that, what are your thoughts on this? What would you want to tell people who are watching this and say, this is why you should be getting involved? Why is it so important? And what are the ways that they can get involved as well?
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting what you just said, because you've just quoted the United Nations rights for disabled persons.
Really?
Yeah.
I hadn't read that. That's just my chance.
That people with disabilities have a right to enjoy life in an equal way to anyone else, and no one has the right to take that away from them, to torture them, to hurt them. But unfortunately, the womb is the most dangerous place for a disabled person to be, because up until birth, all of that can happen. That person can be physically dismembered, poisoned, their heart can be stopped. It's very unsettling. 66% of abortions that take place because of fetal anomaly take place after 15 weeks. So at that point, you have to perform feticide, which means to stop the baby's heart and then take them out of the womb, which is just devastating to think about that. In a society when, growing up with my mum being disabled, I really noticed that increase in accessibility, in buildings being more accessible and activities being more accessible, all of the things that we get to look into for Evelyn, like horse riding lessons, swimming, so many things are just so possible for her. But then also we've got this number. Now that number is actually shrinking very, very by tiny amounts each year. I think because we have things like the surgery that are possible. So parents are seeing another way. And you can correct a lot of heart problems in the womb now as well by surgery. I would just really love that this be talked about more, because I think a lot of this conversation takes place behind closed doors, and I think there's a lot of credit due to people who don't want to condemn people or judge people or tell people what to do with their lives. But then I think as Christians, we see this as a separate person, and God has a plan and a destiny for this separate person. So we're not in any way trying to control what someone does, but we do want to offer the opportunity for that person to then have their life, because that's a right to them.
And it's one of the things that one of the interesting things that has been like a theme running through our segment in Kingdom Justice is every single month we talk about the commands. That's one of the most fundamental that Jesus gives, where he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. He said, but then he goes, love your neighbour as yourself. And in the first month we looked at, like, when we ask who is our neighbour, with like climate change, we were talking about how what we do here impacts people in third world countries, and how actually we're not loving our neighbour if we don't do that. But the very definition of neighbour is one of the things that Jesus does, is that the first thing that he does is to expand that definition. He's saying it's not the person to your left or to your right, and even in your immediate communities, it's people who you would have less value for. Like in his case, he gives the example of like a Samaritan.
Yeah.
And that's someone who actually would have been viewed as less of a person to any kind of culturally normal Jew. Samaritans were like lesser people, and Jesus is saying, no, that's not correct. It does not matter who they are, how they're viewed. These are people, they're precious in the eyes of God. Jesus died for them to be redeemed. And so actually this comes back to a real kind of a gospel heart issue, where we're saying that it does not matter. I personally think it doesn't matter. A child is a child. But in this particular case, this is looking at how we value and look at God's creation in children and in people, where they would have what would be defined as a disability of some sort, and saying actually this is a real gospel kind of on the heart of God issue, where he's calling us to fight injustice and speak up for those who don't have a voice. And I think arguably there's no one who has less of a voice than someone who can't speak for themselves because they're in the womb.
I would agree with that.
So as we're going to close out, I want to give you a chance in a moment just to give some sort of closing thoughts and a statement as an encouragement to anyone who either may know someone who's going through a difficult pregnancy at the moment, or has thought that they're concerned about, like, maybe one day, what if they get pregnant? What if it's a difficult pregnancy? I'll give you those a chance to mention that in a moment. I just want to, before we close, just recommend this book, Desire Child. Now, I do have to confess, I haven't read this. I feel like it's on my reading list, but I feel like I have some level of exemption because I walked through it
definitely.
with you as well. In fact, at one point, I was even in the hospital.
That part was mentioned.
We were staying in a different ward, but for a different reason. But we're very connected, and we were there when we were praying over Evelyn. I remember weeping over with joy over how valued and how loved Evelyn was when we had our sort of family prayer meetings. But I just want to recommend to any viewers, if they have questions, if they want to know what it's like and what the process is like to walk through something like this, but with Jesus, then we recommend this book, and we say that it's really, really good. Where can they find it?
They can find it on Amazon. So if you search for it in Desire Child, and I'll also give you a link that you can post with this video.
Fantastic.
That's great. One of the things that I really love about your relationship with Evelyn is every time you see her, you cry.
I do, a little bit, yeah.
Just tears of joy that she's with us, because there were so many close calls with Evelyn where her life was almost ended. But so
I remember when we were praying, actually, it was when soon after you'd got the news that she had spina bifida, and they were saying, you're going to have to go through the surgery. I think that was at that stage, and there was a lot happening, and a lot that was kind of you guys were preparing to go through. So as a family, we rallied and we prayed. And what the biggest impression that I remember from that was just this feeling of overwhelming love and just hope for who Evelyn was going to be and how loved and valued she was. And actually at the time, I think I remember sharing that I was so aware of the fact that a lot of children in her circumstance, it would have been seen as like an inconvenience. And so a lot of parents, as you said, over 3,000 would choose to abort. And I was so grateful in that moment that she was being born into a family that valued her for who she was, and that wasn't seen as something that was something to remove or a problem to get rid of. Shall we bring Evelyn into this as you give your closing thoughts?
Absolutely.
I think that'd be really lovely.
Look, this is a microphone. So this is Evelyn. She is 1 year old. She's at that stage where her hair sticks up a lot.
Yeah.
And she wants to play
And
with
she wants to
everything
grab
she
the
sees.
microphone.
But yes, we're so glad that Evelyn was given to us because she survived. And we love her, and she's a huge part of our lives and our family. We can't imagine our life without this daughter. And she loves her daddy, and she loves her mummy. I will say that in our story, we had a tremendous amount of support. Joseph, of course, is the eldest of 13 children. Joseph's parents are so with us and praying for us. And my own family in Northern Ireland, rushed out here the moment she was born.
Yeah.
We've got Christians on both sides of our family, and all of them supported us the whole way through. So God provided for us in amazing measures during this journey. But there are charities as well that will help you. So there's Life Charity. And just if you are struggling to know if you should choose life or to terminate the pregnancy, they'll make sure that you have everything that you need. And if you just contact your local church, I think there are just so many options that it isn't just oh, you're going to struggle, then you can end this condition now. Your life will be, I promise, enhanced by the birth of your child. And also I feel like children with disabilities are really, this isn't backed up theologically, but I really feel like they have a special favour and a special kind of light to them. And any of the children with spina bifida that we follow on YouTube or social media, they just have a special kind of joy. And I just think they're a delight to the world. So I'm so happy to have Evelyn.
Well, I can testify to that.
Yes.
Well, thank you both Meghan and Evelyn for coming to join us today. It's been a real privilege to be able to hear your story, hear your perspectives, and to hear from Evelyn as well. I'm excited as we're going to continue our journey over the next coming couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about a bit more about the sort of abortion discussion, looking at how we approach it as Christians in a compassionate way, but also in a way that helps us to be informed and challenge society on its views. And Evelyn has some amazing views.
She wants to say
She's
something.
She's going to be powerful. What do you want to say, Evelyn? That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
We will see Life Church next week on Tuesday. Take care.